My name is Madison Torres. I am 22 years old, and 2 weeks ago I watched my own graduation celebration become an altar built for someone else. Before I tell you how I took everything back, please like and subscribe if this story resonates with you. I can say that now without trembling. I have already lived through the part where my throat closes and my hands go cold and the room tilts slightly, as if the world itself is surprised by what my family is willing to do. I have already walked out of a ballroom full of people who were supposed to see me, and did not. That is why my voice is calm as I tell you this. The victory is behind me. The clarity is permanent. The Torres family has always been precise about one thing: appearance is reality. My father, Richard Torres, is a senior partner at a law firm that likes to call itself Legacy Built, as if the building blocks of our lives were titles, not people. My mother, Patricia, comes from 3 generations of attorneys. She wears refinement like armor, pearls at breakfast, restraint at funerals, a smile that never reveals its teeth. And my younger sister, Olivia. She is the family's bright investment. 19 years old, pre-law, carefully groomed to carry our surname forward like a banner. She is praised in advance for achievements she has not yet earned. Then there is me, the inconvenient daughter who chose nursing. I didn't choose it to rebel. I didn't choose it to be difficult. I chose it because I have always been drawn to the places where reality is raw and unpolished. Hospital corridors at 3 a.m., the sound of a patient breathing unevenly, the hush that falls over a room when pain is finally named. I wanted work that mattered when no one was watching. My father measures worth by prestige. My mother measures it by social alignment. Together, they created a household where love was allocated like a budget, funds directed toward whatever increased the family's value in the eyes of outsiders. Their toxic logic was simple and unwavering: if your success doesn't elevate our reputation, it doesn't count. I learned that logic at 18, the day I told them I had been accepted into the nursing program. I still remember the setting with uncomfortable clarity: the heavy dining table, the low amber light, the glass of whiskey my father held like a verdict. I stood in front of them with an envelope in my hand, trembling with pride and relief. I had worked for that acceptance. I had earned it. I got in, I said, smiling. The nursing program. Full placement. My father didn't smile back. He set his glass down slowly, like a man trying to keep himself civil. Nursing? He repeated, as if he'd misheard. You want to be a servant to doctors for the rest of your life? The word servant fell with deliberate weight. My mother exhaled through her nose and glanced at my father the way she did when I disappointed them in unison. Our family has been in law for 3 generations, she said. You're the first one to break tradition. I'm not breaking anything, I tried to explain quickly, my excitement thinning into anxiety. I want to help people. I want to be there when. My father lifted a hand, cutting my sentence in half. You want to help people, he said, tasting the phrase like it was cheap wine. Madison, ambition is not charity. We did not build this name so you could throw it away in scrubs. It was not anger in his eyes. It was something worse, disappointment that felt like disgust. From that moment forward, my existence in the family became a cautionary tale. My mother stopped asking me about school. My father stopped discussing my future at all, as if acknowledging it would make it real. Every phone call, every family dinner, every holiday became a revolving performance of Olivia's potential. Olivia got an A in her constitutional law seminar, my mother would say, even though Olivia hadn't taken it yet. Olivia's professor says she has a sharp mind, my father would add, as if he'd personally verified it. No one asked about my clinical rotations. No one asked about the patients I helped calm when they woke from surgery. No one asked about the nights I spent studying pharmacology until my eyes blurred. I paid my own tuition with double shifts and exhausted summers. I graduated at the top of my class, summa cum laude, a phrase that belonged to me even if my family refused to hold it with reverence. And still, in our family's ledger, I remained a poor investment. 2 months before graduation, my mother emailed me. No greeting. No softness. No how are you holding up. Just a clean line of logistics, typed like an assistant managing a client's calendar. Your graduation party will be held at the Sterling, 7 p.m., Saturday. Your father has finalized the guest list. You don't need to worry about anything. My graduation party. Planned entirely without me. I stared at the screen, feeling a strange blend of relief and dread. A part of me, the part trained for disappointment, thought perhaps this was their attempt at correction. Perhaps this was how they would finally say, "We see you." Then I opened the attachment labeled guest list. 53 names. I recognized maybe 10 distant aunts, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, a handful of family friends who still called me Maddie as if I were frozen at 12 years old. The rest were strangers. Partners from my father's firm. Their spouses. Business associates. Donor class acquaintances. Even Olivia's sorority friends. Not a single nursing professor. Not Professor Martinez, who had guided me through my most brutal semester. Not Celia, my closest friend from clinicals, who had held my hand in the cafeteria when I thought I might collapse. Not one coworker from the hospital where I trained. I called my mother immediately. She answered on the second ring, breathless as if she'd been busy arranging something. "Mom," I said, forcing my voice to remain calm, "can I invite a few people of my own? Professor Martinez, my friends from the hospital." There was a pause, filled with the sound of my mother thinking through how to explain something she believed was obvious. "Madison," she said at last, voice patient, almost indulgent, "this is an opportunity for our family to make an impression." "My graduation is an impression," I replied, quietly. "You know what I mean," she said, and the edges of her tone sharpened. "Your friends. They wouldn't fit in." I felt the words like a slap. Not because they were loud, but because they were stated as fact. "They're nurses," I said. "They're my mentors. They're the people who actually—" "This is not about that," my mother interrupted, still calm. "The partners' wives will be there. We need the right atmosphere. As if my life were decor. I didn't argue further. Arguing in my family was always interpreted as proof of instability. Instead, I ended the call and sat very still, watching my phone screen go dark. Later that night, a formal invitation card arrived by courier. Thick cream paper. Gold script. The kind of stationery meant to intimidate. I read it once. Then again. Celebrating the Torres family. Not celebrating Madison Torres. Not celebrating Madison's graduation. Just the family. Like I was a footnote attached to their name. I should have seen it coming. The banner, the guest list, the careful removal of anyone who truly knew me, every detail was a quiet announcement. This event was not for me. It was for my father's reputation. That night, I couldn't sleep. My apartment was small, cheap carpet, thin walls, a faint hum from the refrigerator. The kind of place you live when you are building your life without inherited support. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the last 4 years like a film spliced with fatigue. No vacations. No leisurely weekends. No indulgent breaks. Just work, study, clinicals, work again. I told myself, for a long time, just wait. When they see you succeed, they'll come around. But the more I swallowed, the more invisible I became. If I allowed this party to unfold the way my father had designed it, if I sat at a table full of strangers while he paraded Olivia like a trophy, I would become, in the eyes of everyone he respected, exactly what he had always implied I was, the child who couldn't keep up. My gaze drifted to the diploma frame propped against the wall. Summa cum laude. Proof of a life I had earned without applause. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it. Too late for telemarketers, I thought, too late for anything that mattered. A few minutes later, a voicemail notification appeared. Something made me press play. "Hello, this is a message for Madison Torres," a professional voice said. "This is the office of Presbyterian Memorial Hospital. We have some important news we'd like to share with you in person. Please call us back at your earliest convenience." Presbyterian Memorial. The most prestigious hospital in the state. The place where getting an interview was nearly impossible, let alone a job offer. My heart began to race in a way that felt unfamiliar, like hope, but sharper. I called back immediately. The receptionist apologized. The office was closed. Dr. Webb will be available tomorrow morning, she added. Dr. Webb, the director of recruitment himself. I hung up and sat in the dark, my mind suddenly wide awake. For the first time in weeks, my parents' party felt less important. Because somewhere beyond my family's narrow definition of worth, someone might be seeing me clearly. The next morning, before I called the hospital back, I called the one person in my family who had never required me to audition. "Grandma," I said when she answered. "Madison, sweetheart," Eleanor Mitchell replied, warm as sunlight. "I was just thinking about you." Eleanor was my mother's mother, though my father spoke about her with the thin-lipped tolerance reserved for people he could not control. She spent 40 years as a nurse, real nursing, the kind done with tired feet and steady hands. She did not need prestige to be formidable. "How are the party preparations going?" she asked. I hesitated, then told her everything. The guest list, the banner, the back table feeling that had already begun before the event even existed. When I finished, there was silence on the line. A long one. "Did your father invite me?" she asked at last, and her voice had cooled into something precise. I'm not sure," I admitted. "I see," she said. "Then, with quiet certainty, I'll be there regardless." "Grandma, I don't want to cause trouble," I said quickly. "Trouble?" She gave a soft laugh. "Sweetheart, I have faced surgeons who thought they were gods and administrators who thought they owned us. Your father's disapproval does not frighten me." I closed my eyes, suddenly fighting tears. Then her voice gentled. "Your value does not depend on whether your parents can see it. I know what you've accomplished, and I'm proud enough for all of them." I breathed out, shaky. "And Madison," she added, almost casually, "I ran into Dr. Webb last week." My spine straightened. "You know Dr. Webb?" "We served on the Community Health Foundation board together for 15 years, she said. "He mentioned your name. Said some very impressive things." My heart thudded once, hard. "What did he say?" "Call him back," she said. "You'll want to hear it from him directly." Then she hung up before I could ask more. I sat there for a moment holding my phone, feeling something rearrange inside me. My grandmother had not just seen me. She had advocated for me. And my family, my father especially, had no idea what was about to walk into the Sterling in a suit and a hospital letterhead. That day, when I called Presbyterian Memorial back, I did it with a steadiness I had never possessed in my parents' house. Because for the first time, I wasn't asking my family to acknowledge me. I was preparing to let the world do it for them. Saturday arrived dressed in ceremony. The Sterling was already glowing when I stepped out of the cab, crystal chandeliers visible through tall windows, valet attendants moving with rehearsed efficiency, the kind of place where money softened every edge. The air smelled faintly of roses and polished wood. Everything about the building announced importance. I adjusted the strap of my navy dress, simple, fitted, bought with overtime pay, and reminded myself to stand straight. Not because my parents deserved dignity, but because I did. Inside, the room hummed with controlled elegance. White linen tablecloths. Low candlelight. Champagne flutes aligned with mathematical precision. A banner stretched across the far wall in ornate gold lettering. "Celebrating the Torres family." I felt the words before I fully registered them. Not Madison's graduation. Not even congratulations. Just the family. As if I were a background character at an event bearing my name only in the fine print. My father stood near the entrance, already in performance mode, shaking hands with a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. "Richard, congratulations," the man said. "A big night for your family." "Thank you, Charles," my father replied smoothly. "Big things ahead." He noticed me then. A brief nod. No smile. No pause in conversation. I passed him like staff. My mother was near the head table, adjusting place cards with meticulous attention. Olivia stood beside her in an emerald gown that caught the light beautifully. She looked nervous, excited, luminous in the way someone does when the night is designed to crown them. Madison, my mother said without looking up. You're at table 6. I glanced toward the back of the room. Table 6. Near the service corridor. Far from the head table. R from the banner. R from relevance. The front tables are reserved for your father's partners, my mother added, as if this were a reasonable explanation rather than a declaration of hierarchy. You understand. I did understand. I walked to table 6 and sat down alone. My name card was placed carefully, almost apologetically. Around me sat distant relatives who offered polite smiles but no conversation. People who didn't know me well enough to ask how I felt, and had been implicitly instructed not to. I folded my napkin in my lap and breathed. This was it, then. The final arrangement. I was here to fill a chair, not to be seen. At precisely 7:15, the doors opened again. The room shifted. I felt it before I saw her, like a subtle change in pressure. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Eleanor Mitchell walked in as if the building belonged to her. She wore a tailored navy suit and low heels, her silver hair immaculate, her posture unyielding. She did not hurry. She did not scan the room for approval. She moved with the assurance of someone who had never needed permission to exist. My father's face drained of color. Eleanor, he said, stepping into her path. I don't recall sending you an invitation. She stopped just short of him. Smiled, not warmly. I'm here for my granddaughter's graduation, she said. I don't require your invitation, Richard. This is a private event, he replied, lowering his voice. For family. Yes, she said evenly. I am family. She stepped around him with effortless authority and continued into the room. My mother hurried toward them, her heels clicking sharply. Mother, please. Let's not make a scene. I'm not making a scene, Patricia, Eleanor replied. I'm attending. Her eyes swept the room, sharp and observant. Where is Madison seated? My mother hesitated. Table 6. Eleanor followed her gaze. The back. The margins. How appropriate, Eleanor said quietly. Several guests had begun watching openly now. My father laughed too loudly. My mother-in-law, he announced to no one in particular. Always a bit dramatic. Eleanor did not acknowledge him. She walked straight toward me. There's my girl, she said, opening her arms. I stood and hugged her, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender and something steadier, resolve. My throat tightened. I have a surprise, Grandma, I whispered. She smiled, eyes bright. I know, sweetheart. I have one too. Before I could ask what she meant, a server announced that dinner would begin shortly. The room began to settle back into motion, though the undercurrent had changed. My father moved quickly, reasserting himself among his partners, charming, smoothing, reclaiming the narrative. He had no idea how thin that narrative had become. Dinner passed in careful politeness. Plates were cleared. Glasses refilled. I ate mechanically, aware of how small my presence had been designed to be, and how impossible it now felt to disappear completely with Eleanor seated beside me, unyielding as a monument. When dessert plates were cleared, my father stood and tapped his champagne glass. The sound cut through the room. Thank you all for being here tonight, he began, voice practiced, confident. We are gathered to celebrate our family. A pause. As many of you know, the Torres family has a proud tradition in law. 3 generations and soon 4. He turned toward Olivia. She smiled brightly, lifting her glass. I want to raise a toast to the future, my father continued. To my youngest daughter, Olivia, who has been accepted to Harvard Law. Applause rippled through the room. Genuine, admiring. My mother nodded proudly. Olivia's cheeks flushed. My father waited for the room to quiet. I wish, he said slowly, savoring the moment, I truly wish it was you holding a diploma tonight, Olivia. You are the only child who has ever truly made me proud. The words landed with surgical precision. The room stilled, not completely, but enough. Enough for the discomfort to register. Enough for the absence of my name to feel deliberate. I sat at table 6, my hands folded in my lap, my glass untouched. No one looked at me. Pity flickered briefly across a few faces, then retreated. Indifference reclaimed its territory. My grandmother stood. The sound of her chair against the floor was not loud, but it was final. "Richard," Eleanor said, her voice calm and clear, "you forgot something." My father's smile tightened. "Eleanor, this really isn't the time." "This is exactly the time," she replied. She stepped forward, into the center of the room, where the light was strongest. "You just gave a toast at your daughter's graduation party," she continued. "And you didn't mention her once." Murmurs stirred. "You wished a different child was holding the diploma," Eleanor said evenly. "At the party for the child who actually earned it." My mother rose halfway from her seat. "This is a family matter." "No," Eleanor said. "You made it public when you planned this humiliation." My father's jaw clenched. "Sit down or leave." "I'll do neither." The doors opened behind her. Footsteps crossed the threshold. And the air in the room changed completely. The man who entered did not hurry. That detail mattered. He didn't rush as though late or apologetic. He walked with the untroubled assurance of someone accustomed to rooms pausing for him. Mid-40s, silver beginning to edge his temples, suit tailored but understated. Authority without ornament. He carried a large envelope. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, his voice carrying cleanly across the room. "But I have urgent business with Miss Madison Torres." Every head turned. My father frowned, the muscles along his jaw tightening as he assessed the intrusion the way he would an opposing counsel. "And you are?" The man smiled, not deferentially, not aggressively. Simply confident. "Dr. Samuel Webb," he said. "Director of Recruitment at Presbyterian Memorial Hospital." Silence fell with weight. Presbyterian Memorial was not a name that needed explanation. It was the kind of institution my father referenced when he wanted to sound informed about fields he privately dismissed. The kind of place whose approval carried social gravity. Dr. Webb did not look at my father again. He walked past him as if he were a decorative pillar and stopped directly in front of my table. "Miss Torres," he said, extending his hand. "It's an honor to finally meet you in person." I stood, my legs steady in a way that surprised me. I took his hand. "Dr. Webb," I replied. "I didn't expect." "I wanted to deliver this personally," he said, lifting the envelope. "Given the occasion." He turned slightly, so the room could see what he held, though he did not perform. He simply allowed the facts to occupy space. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Webb continued, "forgive the intrusion, but this could not wait." My father stepped forward. "Now just a moment." Dr. Webb raised a single finger. Not rude, decisive. "I'm speaking," he said. And my father, senior partner, master of rooms, fell silent. Dr. Webb opened the envelope and removed a document bearing the hospital's letterhead. The logo caught the light like a seal of legitimacy. "Madison Torres," he read aloud, "graduated summa cum laude from the School of Nursing." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "She ranked first in her cohort," he continued, unhurried. "Her clinical evaluations were the highest Presbyterian Memorial has reviewed in the last 15 years. I heard a quiet intake of breath from somewhere behind me. "It is with considerable enthusiasm," Dr. Webb said, "that we offer her a position in our emergency department." He paused. "Effective immediately." He let that settle before delivering the final detail. "Starting salary, $78,000. The silence that followed was different from before. This one recalibrated status. I heard someone whisper, incredulous, 78? Dr. Webb smiled faintly. "To provide context," he said, looking up at the room, "first-year associates at top law firms in this city typically begin at 65. Then, only then, did he look at my father. "If anyone wishes to compare," he added mildly. My father's face drained of color. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Olivia stared at me, not smiling, not angry, just stunned. Dr. Webb handed me the letter. "Congratulations," he said. "You earned this." I took it with both hands. The paper felt heavier than it should have. But he was not finished. "There is one more item," he said, reaching into his jacket for a second envelope. "A commendation." He opened it and addressed the room again. "This letter is from Dean Harrison of the School of Nursing," he explained. "It reads, in part." He cleared his throat and read slowly, deliberately. "Madison Torres is the most exceptional nursing student we have trained in the past 15 years. Her academic performance was flawless, but more importantly, her clinical judgment, composure, and compassion exceeded every expectation. We are proud to nominate her for the Future Healthcare Leaders Program, reserved for the top 1% of healthcare graduates nationwide." The room erupted. Not polite applause. Not obligatory acknowledgement. Real applause. I watched as my father's colleagues turned toward me with newly attentive eyes. "Richard," someone said, openly astonished, "why didn't you tell us?" My father opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Dr. Webb folded the letter and handed it to me. "Your grandmother," he said quietly, "spoke of you with great respect." Eleanor stepped forward then, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. "I simply told the truth," she said. "Everything else, she earned." The hierarchy in the room had shifted. My father stood frozen at the head of the table, stripped of narrative control, watching the currency he worshipped, prestige, recognition, admiration, transfer visibly to the daughter he had dismissed. My mother looked between us, her practiced composure finally cracking. Olivia lowered her glass. No one applauded her now. And I understood, in that moment, something precise and irrevocable. They had not underestimated me by accident. They had done it because acknowledging my worth would have required them to confront their own smallness. There are moments when power doesn't explode. It simply relocates. You can feel it when it happens. A subtle shift in posture. A recalibration of attention. A room deciding, all at once, who no longer matters. That is what followed Dr. Webb's final sentence. The applause softened into conversation, but the tone had changed. It was no longer celebratory in the way my father intended. It had become evaluative, curious, reordering. People began to stand. Not to congratulate Olivia, but to approach me. "Madison, congratulations," one of my father's partners said, extending his hand with a sincerity that had not existed 5 minutes earlier. "Emergency medicine is impressive." Another added, "Your grandmother speaks very highly of you." Now I see why. I accepted their words with composure, not gratitude. Recognition given only after public validation is not kindness, it is correction. I did not need to reward it. My father remained standing at the head of the room, his champagne glass still raised, as if frozen mid-performance. The role he had rehearsed for weeks had collapsed in real time, and he had no understudy. My mother was the first to approach. She moved carefully, like someone stepping onto unstable ground. "Madison," she said quietly, touching my arm. "We need to talk." I turned to her fully. I did not pull away. I did not lean in. "No," I said. "We don't." Her brows knit together, confusion flashing across her face. "This is a misunderstanding." "There was nothing unclear," I replied evenly. "You planned a party to celebrate a family image. You excluded the people who knew my work. You seated me where I would be least visible. And you let your husband say what he has always believed." She swallowed. "Your father didn't mean." "I heard him," I said. "So did everyone else." Behind her, my father finally moved. He stepped forward, jaw tight, voice low and controlled. "You didn't have to do this publicly," he said. I looked at him then, really looked at him. A man who had built his entire identity on perception, now stripped of the ability to manage it. "I didn't," I said calmly. "You did." His eyes flicked to the guest still watching, still recalculating. "This was supposed to be about family." "It was," I replied. "Just not the one you curated." Olivia stood nearby, silent. For the first time in her life, she did not know where to place herself. The spotlight she had been handed had dimmed, not because she failed, but because the truth had arrived. "I didn't ask for this," she said softly. "I know," I replied. "And I meant it. But you benefited from it." She nodded once. That was all. I turned away then, not in anger, not in triumph. Simply finished. Eleanor took my hand. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. We walked out together, past the banner, past the tables, past the life my parents had designed without me. Outside, the night air was cool and grounding. The city continued as it always had, indifferent, expansive, free. In the weeks that followed, there were attempts. Calls that went unanswered. Messages framed as concern rather than apology. Invitations disguised as reconciliation. I declined them all. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. My father lost something that night he never recovered: authority over the narrative. Among his peers, the story became something he could not control, a cautionary tale whispered at firm dinners and donor events. My mother returned to her version of peace, but it was thinner now, more fragile. Olivia continued her path. I wished her well, from a distance. As for me, I moved forward. I began my residency at Presbyterian Memorial, surrounded by people who value competence over pedigree. I built a life that did not require erasure to function. I learned, finally, that love does not demand that you make yourself small. On Sundays, I still have dinner with my grandmother. We sit at her kitchen table, the kind of table where conversation overlaps and silence is never punitive. Sometimes she looks at me and smiles. "You stood exactly where you needed to," she says. And she's right. I was never dramatic. I was never difficult. I was never invisible. I was simply born into a family that confused reputation with worth. Leaving them did not destroy me. It revealed me. And that, quiet, permanent, unarguable, was how I took everything back.